like pisses me off when people are like, she's not the face of the league.
Who would be?
What?
What if the greatest threat to the WNBA's new golden age wasn't a rival league or a decline in talent, but a silent, bitter war brewing within its own rank? A hidden conflict so vicious and so blatant that it forced one of the league's toughest veterans to break the sacred players' code and issue a brutal warning that echoed far beyond the basketball court. This isn't just a story about a hard foul or a rookie's welcome to the pros. This is about what happened behind the scenes. A chilling and coordinated display of disrespect aimed squarely at its brightest star, Caitlin Clark. It's a story that exposes a deep-seated jealousy threatening to tear the league apart from the inside. A conspiracy of resentment that has put the WNBA on a collision course with self-destruction. The on-court action that day was supposed to be the main event, a high-stakes showdown between the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky. The atmosphere was electric, charged by the presence of the rookie phenomenon, who was single-handedly rewriting the league's record books for viewership and ticket sales. But deep in the third quarter, that electricity curdled into something far more sinister. As the ball went out of bounds, Caitlin Clark stood waiting, unguarded and uninvolved in the play. That's when Kennedy Carter, a player with a reputation for aggressive play, made her move. It wasn't a basketball play. It wasn't a defensive stance. It was a calculated, blind-sided hip check delivered with deliberate force. A cheap shot designed for one purpose, to send a message. Clark stumbled, caught completely off guard by the unprovoked physicality. Soon the referee's whistle pierced the stunned silence of the arena. But the initial call was just a common foul, a punishment so laughably inadequate, it was an insult in itself. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath at the audacity of the act. Yet, this single flagrant moment of aggression was merely the spark. It was the ignition point for a powder keg of resentment that had been building since the moment Clark's name was called on draft night. And what unfolded next on the sidelines and in the press conferences would pull back the curtain on the ugly truth of the battle she was truly facing. The foul itself was a disgrace, but it was the behavior on the Chicago Sky sideline that truly revealed the disturbing behind-the-scenes reality of the situation. As Kennedy Carter walked back to her bench, the cameras caught a chilling scene. Her teammate Angel Reese, another high-profile rookie and Clark's collegiate rival, leaped to her feet. She wasn't just standing. She was applauding Carter, a wide grin spreading across her face as she celebrated the dirty play. This wasn't a subtle nod of approval. It was a loud, public, and unmistakable endorsement of an unsportsmanlike act against a competitor. It felt choreographed, a theatrical display of defiance designed to show a unified front of hostility. This calculated disrespect continued to bleed into the post-game interactions. The Chicago Sky head coach, Teresa Weatherspoon, a legend of the sport, had an opportunity to condemn the behavior and uphold a standard of professionalism. Instead, she dodged. She offered vague platitudes about passion and competition to refusing to comment directly on Carter's actions. It was a masterclass in deflection, a coach protecting her player at the expense of the league's integrity. Carter herself amplified this wall of silence. When reporters tried to ask her about the incident, she flatly refused to take any questions about Caitlin Clark, shutting down any attempt at accountability. This coordinated response, the on-court celebration, the coach's dismissal, and the players' defiance painted a dark picture. It confirmed that this wasn't an isolated act of frustration from one player. It was a cultural problem, a shared sentiment on that bench, that this kind of behavior was not only acceptable, but worthy of celebration. As the league itself remained silent, it became terrifyingly clear that if Clark was going to find an ally, it wouldn't come from the coaches or the officials. It would have to come from somewhere else entirely, from a voice that was about to risk everything to speak the truth. As the controversy raged and the league office stayed bafflingly mute, the silence was finally shattered by a player who has forged a career out of grit, hustle, and a profound respect for the game's unwritten rules. Sophie Cunningham of the Phoenix Mercury. Cunningham isn't the kind of superstar who dominates headlines with record-breaking stats. She is something more fundamental to the sport. An enforcer, a glue player, a veteran who understands the delicate balance between fierce competition and professional respect. Her voice carries a different kind of weight, one that resonates deeply in locker rooms across the league. Watching the incident and the subsequent denials unfold, Cunningham saw something that went beyond a hard foul. She saw a line being crossed, a dangerous precedent being set. She saw a league seemingly willing to sacrifice its most valuable asset on the altar of petty jealousy. She witnessed a group of players letting their personal animosity cloud their professional judgment, and she decided she could not and would not stay quiet any longer. In an appearance on a local Phoenix sports show, she prepared to do the unthinkable. She was going to break the players' unspoken code of silence. What she was about to say wasn't just a critique. It was a direct challenge, a declaration of war against the brewing toxicity. Her words, delivered with a calm but chilling intensity, would immediately cut through the noise at exposing the hypocrisy of the situation and delivering a brutal warning that the entire WNBA desperately needed to hear, whether they were ready for it or not. Sophie Cunningham didn't just condemn the foul. She ripped the veil off the league's internal politics and exposed the raw, unspoken reality of how respect is maintained in professional basketball. With ice in her veins, she laid out a scenario that sent shock waves through the sport. She said without a hint of hesitation that if a player had ever delivered a similar cheap shot to one of her team's stars, specifically naming legends like Diana Taurasi or Brittany Gurrier, the outcome would have been immediate and violent. "I'm just going to say it," she declared. "If that was one of our players, it would have been a different story." The meaning behind those words was crystal clear and absolutely brutal. There would have been swift and decisive retaliation. Her team wouldn't have looked to the referees. They wouldn't have waited for a league investigation. Justice would have been served right there on that court in a language that every player understands. This was a stunning look behind the curtain. An admission that player-policed enforcement often supersedes any official rules. Cunningham's warning was a masterfully delivered triple threat. First, it was a direct and public condemnation of Kennedy Carter and the Chicago Sky, branding their actions as not just unsportsmanlike, but cowardly. Second, it was a subtle but sharp critique of the Indiana Fever, implying that Clark's own teammates were failing in their duty to protect her. Finally, and most powerfully, it was a direct challenge to the WNBA's authority. The message was unmistakable. If you, the league, will not step up to police your players and protect the very person who is single-handedly elevating your sport to unprecedented heights, then teams like the Phoenix Mercury will do it for you. Her statement was an earthquake, validating the fears of millions of fans and confirming that what was happening to Caitlin Clark wasn't just rough play. It was a targeted campaign of disrespect that the league's toughest players would never tolerate for their own. The silence was officially broken, and the real uncomfortable conversation about the league's dark secret was finally beginning. Sophie Cunningham's bombshell warning did more than just call out a single dirty play. It ripped open the floodgates of speculation, lending credibility to a dark theory that had been festering in the shadows that there was a coordinated league-wide conspiracy to hate Caitlin Clark. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Analysts and fans started connecting the dots, realizing the Kennedy Carter incident wasn't an anomaly, but part of a disturbing and consistent pattern. They pointed to the constant off-ball schvies, the overly aggressive closeouts, and the relentless physical targeting Clark had endured since her very first preseason game. Whispers from league insiders grew into a roar, painting a picture of deep-seated resentment among veteran players. These reports suggested a palpable fury over the seismic shift in attention Clark had caused. Veterans who had toiled in relative obscurity for years were reportedly incensed by Clark's historic 8-figure Nike endorsement, a deal larger than entire team payrolls. They were bitter about the Indiana Fever flying on charter planes, a luxury long denied to the rest of the league, a privilege granted almost entirely due to Clark's star power. The media's singular obsession with the rookie, turning every game into the Caitlin Clark show, was seen as a profound insult to the women who felt they had built the league with their own blood, sweat, and tears. This went beyond simple professional jealousy. It morphed into a dangerous ideology, a clash between the old guard and the new queen. How an unspoken consensus seemed to form among a faction of players. Clark had to be physically and mentally broken down to earn her place. They refused to acknowledge the reality that her gravitational pull was lifting all boats, raising salaries, increasing viewership, and creating opportunities for everyone. This wasn't a formal conspiracy hatched in a secret meeting, but a more insidious, unspoken agreement, a shadow campaign of hostility playing out in plain sight. With every celebrated cheap shot and every uncalled foul, this toxic agenda was being executed, threatening to extinguish the league's brightest star before she could even truly shine. While a faction of players was busy enforcing their own toxic brand of justice on the court, on the WNBA's front office was committing a far more catastrophic error, a complete and utter failure to protect its billion-dollar asset. The league was experiencing a commercial supernova, a phenomenon entirely driven by Caitlin Clark. Viewership numbers weren't just up, they were shattering all-time records. Arenas that once had empty seats were now sold out, with fans lining up for hours just to catch a glimpse of the rookie. Merchandise was flying off the shelves at an unprecedented rate. Clark wasn't just another player. She was a one-woman economic stimulus package, delivering the mainstream relevance the WNBA had craved for nearly 3 decades. Yet, when faced with this historic opportunity, the league's response to the blatant assault on its main attraction was shockingly inept and dangerously slow. And the foul from Kennedy Carter was obvious to everyone watching. Yet, it was initially dismissed as a common foul. It was only after a full-blown public inferno, fueled by viral clips and furious commentary from sports media's heaviest hitters, that the league office reluctantly upgraded the foul to a flagrant one, a full 24 hours after the fact. In the hyper-speed of the modern news cycle, this delay was an eternity. It broadcasted a message of weakness and indecision to the world. It suggested the league was either terrified of upsetting its veteran players or too incompetent to recognize a crisis when it was unfolding on national television. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert's profound silence in the immediate aftermath was deafening. Her failure to issue a swift and strong statement condemning the act and reaffirming the league's commitment to player safety created a leadership vacuum. This inaction allowed the narrative of a league in chaos, a league that condones bullying, to take root and spread like wildfire. This was more than a PR blunder. It was a high-stakes gamble with the future of the sport. The WNBA was letting its internal politics endanger the Golden Goose, risking the alienation of millions of new fans who were tuning in to watch greatness. Not a targeted takedown. The league's catastrophic fumble created a void of leadership. And that void was immediately filled by a hurricane of media outrage, with some of the most powerful voices in sports stepping in to act as the judge, jury, and executioner that the WNBA refused to be. This story escaped the confines of the sports world and exploded into a national debate. And in this fight, Caitlin Clark found a host of powerful and unexpected allies. On ESPN's first tape, Stephen A. Smith unleashed one of his signature tirades, eviscerating the WNBA players involved. He called them petty and shameful, accusing them of professional malpractice for being so blinded by jealousy that they couldn't see Clark was the rising tide lifting all their ships. He directly challenged them, arguing that their actions were hurting their own wallets and the future of their sport. Pat McAfee dedicated huge segments of his massively popular show to the controversy, using his platform to call out the players by name, labeling their actions as nothing short of bullying. He expressed the outrage of the average new fan to someone drawn in by Clark's talent only to be repulsed by the hostility she faced. Even NBA legends like Charles Barkley weighed in, expressing his disgust and calling on the petty veterans to stop the nonsense. These media titans who had historically given the WWN only fleeting attention were now dedicating a block segments to its internal drama. They amplified the story to an audience of millions, many of whom were forming their first impression of the league. And that impression was a damning one, a league that was unprofessional, vindictive, and actively sabotaging its own success. This media firestorm completely wrested control of the narrative away from the WNBA. It was no longer an internal issue to be handled behind closed doors. It was now a public spectacle, a trial by media. So, with the league's players and its leadership cast as the villains, the story had gone nuclear, confirming every one of Sophie Cunningham's warnings and putting unbearable pressure on the commissioner to finally act before the brand was permanently damaged. The fallout from this explosive chain of events has left the WNBA standing at a pivotal and perilous crossroad. The ugly incident involving Kennedy Carter and Caitlin Clark was not merely a foul. It was the tremor that exposed a deep and dangerous fault line running directly through the league's culture. It revealed a bitter civil war, a battle between the resentment of the old guard and the unprecedented promise of a new era. Sophie Cunningham's brutal warning was never just about a single cheap shot. It was a desperate 5-alarm firebell, not an attempt to shock a league out of its complacent slumber as it drifted towards self-sabotage. She bravely spoke the unspoken truth, exposing the toxic hypocrisy of a league that publicly markets its newfound star while privately permitting a culture of hostility to poison the well. The saga laid bare a disheartening reality that some players driven by envy would rather tear down the very person responsible for their newfound relevance than share the spotlight. The league's pathetic delayed response, the roaring condemnation from the national media, and the chilling unified front of disrespect from players and staff have painted an unforgettable and deeply unflattering portrait. This has transcended sports and has become a fundamental choice about the league's very identity. Will the WNBA heed the warning and take decisive and meaningful action to protect its future, stamping out the jealousy and fostering an environment where its brightest talents can soar? Or will it surrender to the bitter gatekeepers of the past, allowing them to successfully tear down the one person who holds the key to a future they could once only dream of? The next move belongs to the league, and an entire world of new fans is watching, waiting to see if they will save themselves from themselves.